I'm making a brain. Not just any brain, but something that can give real fMRI data, like this or this or this, a physical platform to live on. The first step in ensuring someone is actually going to use it is portability. We need a battery. A tool battery, to be more precise. This gives us 3 things to think about. First, how to connect the battery. Second, how to protect the battery. And third, how to get the right output voltage. Connecting the battery is easy. You just need 2 of these and a complete disregard for your personal safety. This is something I'm giving to my partner, so we need an upgrade. This is what I did. I bought a copper plate 1 mm thick and tried to recreate these connectors I can see on the drill by cutting the metal with a simple handsaw, which I had to do 6 times, of course. I then designed a form and another one until they finally clicked together. The form is designed to hold the copper plates with the screws, which can then in turn hold some actual electric connectors. This is how the battery setup looks like. I have this cover on here just so that I can protect the system from short-circuiting right at the battery. This looks wrong. I think there's like a much easier way to do it, but I just can't find it. So if you know something, please write in the comments. For protection, we obviously need some fuses, but there's another way our battery can fail. Did you know that you can break a rechargeable battery by emptying it completely? Meaning batteries always need some charge in them if you want to keep using them. To protect them from discharging completely, we need something called a low voltage protection circuit. As a battery loses power, it also slowly loses voltage. So by putting a circuit between the battery and the device, which reads out the voltage, I can stop the power draw of the battery when the voltage gets too low. To get the right output voltage, I just got one of these. It transforms any voltage between 8 and 36 volts to 5 volts and is rated up until 20 amps, which is good enough for me. Now comes the brain part. I need a brain. And not just any brain, I need one of these, which is also known as the standard MNI brain. You can see that it is kind of a standard brain if you've seen many brains. For example, here's my brain, here's my friend's brain, and here is my partner's brain. I found it somewhere on the internet and used neuroscience software to make it into an STL file. Now that I have the brain, I have to perform topological torture to get it to fit to my needs. But what exactly are my needs? To display fMRI study results, I plan to fill the inner part of it with LEDs. So to make that process easier, I did the following things. I first combined everything together, and then I made a smooth hollow object that still resembles a brain, but is a bit easier to work with. I'm kind of glossing over it in the rest of the voiceover, but this was so hard to do. Like inflating the brain was very easy, but then removing these internal vertices and still keeping the same shape was somehow very, very hard. In the end, I managed it because after a couple of weeks, I found a setting in Mesh Mixer called Make Solid, which lets me remove all the internal vertices and get a similar surface out of it that I had as input. And finally, I cut the brain into 2 halves so that I can actually open it up. To do that, I used a combination of MeshLab, Mesh Mixer, and Blender. This was my first prototype, but I used the wrong sized holes and had a hard time fitting in the magnets, so I just printed another one. Now, to give the brain a place to sit on and fit all the electronics inside, I'm making a base. This is how it turned out. I wanted the footprint to be larger than the brain so that I have an easier time with packaging and transport. I wanted it to allow for some passive cooling, so I made some holes, and I wanted it to be thin enough that you can grab it with one hand. I don't think it is my best design, but at that point I was strapped for time as the conference I wanted it to be ready for was right around the corner. So, onto the electronics. The plan is incredibly simple. Use some hot glue to glue 440 LEDs into the brain and wire them all to these two rails, rated for 10 amps each. And while you watch me struggle with that, I wanted to take some time and talk about this video's recommendation. Last time, if I remember correctly, it was 91 Days the anime. And this time it's a book. It's The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, who is to this day, I would say, my favorite author. It's sci-fi, and Ursula K. Le Guin has the magical power to use these incredibly supernatural environments to curate a profoundly human story. When reading, I always get the feeling that these settings and worlds that she constructs are like windows that let us look into the human condition and our relationships as people clearer than we could ever do without them. As we are less bound by our history and values that we involuntarily apply to everything we read. So this video's recommendation is anything by Ursula K. Le Guin, but The Dispossessed is certainly one of my favorites. If you have read the book, feel free to comment your thoughts on it, as I generally enjoy getting another perspective on a piece of media. Now back to the brain. There are a couple of mistakes I did here. The first one was ordering the wrong wires, so that I had to reorder a couple of different sets just so that I can finish in time, because I did not know which wires I needed exactly, and I could not take the risk to wait a couple of days for delivery and try them all out sequentially. I always thought these solid wires were a better fit no matter the project, but actually here it turned out that the flexible wires were much more forgiving when it comes to pressing all of this inside here. The second mistake was gluing a strip wrong and trying to save it with clever wiring, which was a pain in the ass to do and led to some other problems later on. I should have just pulled the strip out and replaced it, but I was tired, lazy, and afraid I might ruin the print and have to redo it all over again. Anyway, here's my reaction to turning it on for the first time. Okay, now I connected the ESP32 to the rail because I uploaded the code. And now when I plug in the battery, the LEDs should light up. And either the LEDs light up or the LEDs light up and everything goes up in flames. So let's see. I'm extremely nervous. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this one-handed. Okay. Some of the LEDs lit up. This means something works, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I did wrong. But it looks like one of the connections is somewhere having an issue. Wait, let's look at it like that. I mean, it looks beautiful, but let's see where the issue is. Here somewhere. Okay, to me it looks like this LED strip is broken because you see it light up here and then 1 second later you can't see it light up there. I think it means I just have to replace it. Unfortunately, I guess see you then again. Oh my god, this is okay. Hi. For you it's been probably a couple of seconds, and for me it's also been actually a couple of seconds because I said fuck this and went to the kitchen to make some breakfast because it's already 1 p.m. Then I went back as my pan was heating up just to see which LEDs may be faulty. Yes, I know I have a hard time putting things down. And then I plugged the battery back in and it all lit up. And then I pulled the battery out, plugged it back in again, and it lit up again. So yeah, it's working. I'm happy. I'm afraid it will happen again, and my food is burning, so I have to turn it back off. I have to also turn the camera off and say bye bye. I first have to eat. Bye bye. After making sure the LEDs work, there was still a bunch of work to do. The bulk of it was in making the interface and mapping the LEDs. For the interface, the original idea was to have a button box next to a slider. The buttons are there to control which sequence we are playing, and the slider is there to scroll through the frames of the sequence manually. For the buttons, I looked online and found some cool designs and used a similar technique where the cover is a rigid body that goes over the buttons. Then I added some covers on top so that I can customize the buttons without reprinting the whole cover, and this looks just a bit cooler than a flat sheet. The slide idea was worse than expected. I thought using a linear potentiometer would surely allow me to distinguish between 100 different discrete bins that later could be time frames, but it did not. Well, at least not in the price range I was looking in. But this may also come as a blessing, as I replaced the slider with a rotary encoder and had enough room left on the panel to add a small OLED screen. This is how the buttons look. So it's all just one flat sheet from the other side, and I'm pressing the buttons by bending the plastic sheet, and this is how I wired them up. You can also see that the cover for the OLED is not really attached to the OLED, it's just sitting on top. This and this and this and this and this, these are all huge planning mistakes because I kind of didn't think that all of this would take space. And I'm very, very lucky that it all fits in here and that I was able to squish it all in here. But next time, I'm definitely going to take some measures so that I have a place to fit in the fuses and the connectors. So with the hardware in place, we need one important step before we can finish the software. Mapping every LED to a real coordinate in the brain. This is also with a step where the clever wiring turned out to be a bit annoying, as the LEDs were not next to each other when switching to the next one. Right. Remodeled this part with gardening shears and added a little gap so that I can pass the USB cable through there. That's why I still have the old cover. I wrote some code so that I can press the buttons and advance the LEDs. I've also tested how bright I can get it. It can handle 50% all white bright LEDs pretty easily. Yeah, what you can see right now is 10% of LED power, and it is already pretty bright. It's a little less bright in real life than on video, but even like 20% or something is more than enough. And I'm not going to have all LEDs white and all of them on at the same time. But we can wander through the brain, and we also have an output of what the current LED is that's lit up. There's a reason why I wanted to get this done early. It's because my partner now has to go with the button over each LED and mark their spot in the 3D coordinates of the brain. Only then they can use this brain to project their research results onto this brain, because then they have the coordinates and can use the coordinates to write a script to say how bright the LEDs have to be and which LEDs have to be this bright. Yeah, that's why I wanted to get this done early and I was in such a rush. There's not much to the software. I used an ESP32 for the brain of the brain, and it works pretty well. I can choose a sequence with any of these buttons, play and pause it with this button, and use the rotary encoder to scroll in time. Currently, there's data loaded in from one specific study my partner did, where people were getting an electric impulse, like a small shock, to the left arm. Given that the signals from the left arm are processed in the right brain half, the results show what we expect. The brighter or more white LEDs, the higher the blood oxygen level dependent signal, or Bolt signal in short, which is the ratio of oxygenated blood and deoxygenated or used blood. A neuroscientist could tell you more on that if you're interested, but my knowledge is at its limits, so let's wrap this up. It's been a long journey. This was my first prototype I did for an exhibition about a year ago. It had only one button and was definitely not portable, but I also missed the design a bit. I think this looks a bit cooler if you don't think about practicality. Anyway, I have been printing brains for about 3 years now, and this seems like the final iteration of something useful coming from that project. I am definitely going to make something less useful in the future, so look forward to that. I had a lot of fun and got rid of that obsession about this project I had in my head. Bye bye, thank you for watching and have a nice day.